Hello! I'm LegenTerry, and this is Blueprints, the indie puzzle roguelike game developed by Dogubomb and published by Raw Fury. Blueprints is a game that's really hard to talk about, so this review is going to be a pretty quick one. Now, dancing around spoilers isn't exactly new territory for me. I include a spoiler warning and a timestamp to skip to somewhere in almost every review that I do when the game focuses on narrative because I don't like ruining people's experience. But this is a special case. Because of the way that Blueprints plays, practically any footage of the game could be considered a spoiler by the right person. So what I'm going to do is just use some of the most generic stock footage looking slow walks through early rooms possible, unless I'm trying to show off a specific mechanic or make a point about something in particular. Anyways, let's get on with the review. Blueprints is the passion project of a very small indie team headed up by Tonda Ross, a man who has made his living in Hollywood doing a blend of cinematography, motion design, and photographic direction for a list of big name brands that you've definitely heard of. Ones like Pepsi, FedEx, AT&T, Snickers, and more. But apparently, he just wasn't fulfilled with creating content for the sake of others, so he buckled down and set his sights on the world of video games. And over the course of the last 8 years, he and his team of creatives have slowly chipped away at their block of marble stone, looking to eventually set free their own Statue of David from the rocky prison that confines it. At its heart, Blueprints is a puzzle game set to the rhythm of a roguelike, but that also belies its narrative nature. The name itself, Blueprints, is also pulling double duty as a fairly obvious play on words. Blueprints, you see where we're going here. When you begin the game, you are told very little. You're Simon Jones, the grandnephew of a man named Herbert S. Sinclair who has recently passed away. In his final will and testament, he leaves you his massive 45-room estate. However, there's a stipulation attached to your inheritance. You will lose the estate if you cannot find and enter a mysterious 46th room whose location has been kept a secret from all of his staff and colleagues. Beyond the promise of a hidden room in the estate, this is no ordinary mansion. Somehow, all of the rooms on the property are able to shift and change locations at the drop of a hat. One day you could take a walk to the kitchen, and the next day you could retrace your steps back to the same place, only to find yourself in a bedroom. And this is where we come in. Every morning, you're tasked with drafting the blueprints for the estate, with the goal of finding your way to that 46th room. Every time you approach a closed door, you're offered a choice between 3 different rooms, and every single one has its own interesting quirks or reasons you may want to add them to the estate. Some have resources you can collect, or a helpful item to add to your inventory. Some might have multiple exits, making it easier to progress your layout in different directions. Some have basic puzzles that tease your brain in exchange for rewards. And some are just there to add to your understanding of the plot. Now, this is a roguelike after all, so you won't get everything done in a single day. You're limited to a certain amount of steps that you can travel before your character gets exhausted and needs to call it a day. But before you get the wrong idea, it isn't counting your character's actual steps, just the amount of times that you've crossed the threshold between 2 different rooms. Anytime you open a door and enter a room, that counts as 1. Whenever you need to backtrack through multiple rooms, keeping in mind how many steps you need to go to reach that room and how many steps it will take to get back becomes a big part of the strategy. One big tip I'll share with you is that you don't lose any steps when you open a new door, only when you go through it. So if a room has multiple exits and you don't like the selection you got from the first doorway, you can just choose one and without going into it, turn around and try opening the door on the other side of the room instead. When I first started playing Blueprints, I was a little lukewarm on it. It doesn't try to conceal the fact that it draws heavily on the puzzle adventure games of yesteryear like Myst and Riven for inspiration. It's got that same melancholy vibe and feeling that there's more to uncover as you wander around the playable space. And if you're old enough to have experienced those types of games in their heyday, you know that the solutions to their puzzles tended to require copious amounts of note-taking to keep any kind of forward momentum. Well, very early on, Blueprints kind of tells you, hey, you should be taking notes. And with me being the extremely analytical person I am, while also having experienced the frustration those games burdened us all with, I snapped pictures left and right and scribbled down hundreds of words in the Notes app on my phone like a madman. No detail was too small to record, from the space on the grid that I first found the room on, to the color of the wallpaper, to the fabric of the clothes in the closets. By the time I rolled credits, I had 355 photos and 4 separate documents written. And it was around that time that I realized I really only needed about 10% of it for the main mission. Part of that's on me because I was expecting to run into a lot more of the moon logic I'd been subjected to before. You know, those puzzles with wacky solutions that the developers completely jumped the shark on. But also, a lot of the stuff I'd found are leftovers meant for the post-game content, or are there to give additional context about the characters who Mr. Sinclair surrounded himself with. the roles they played around the estate before your arrival, and the bigger narrative picture being painted about the world outside of its walls. About 90% of what I took down might have turned out to be unnecessary for reaching the 46th room, but it wasn't all completely useless. And Blueprints is particularly good about performing this kind of trick. There are many puzzles wrapped within other puzzles, the threads of which are laid bare when you're observant enough, and you can tug on the ends of them at just about any time to see where they lead. It becomes less about just getting to room 46 as fast as possible, and more about where your curiosity leads you. Sure, you can try to cut a line straight to the goal at the end if you want, but it's going to make things more difficult for you, and then you also miss out on all these other neat little details tucked away in the rooms that you haven't managed to draft yet. You'll be left wondering, well, what about this room? I found all these things in there, and they're trying to lead me to these other 3 rooms. What was all of that about? It's all constructed very cleverly, and there are so many of these great eureka moments just waiting to happen when you dig a little bit deeper. Realistically, there are only 3 negatives that I can ascribe to Blueprints. Firstly, the presentation isn't the best. This is a very small gripe because you only see like 3 cutscenes across the entirety of your 15 to 20 hour playthrough of the main story, but to put it bluntly, there's just something wrong with the way that they were rendered. They all look like they've been exported at some sub-HD resolution like 540p and 20 FPS or something, which makes no sense to me. It was so distracting that I tried watching my recording of the opening cutscene on a completely different screen, and then I went to YouTube to find a version someone else had uploaded and watched the cutscene again because I thought there was something broken on my end. But apparently that's just how they look. I could give them the benefit of the doubt and say that it was a stylistic choice, but logically speaking, there's just no way this was intentional. Out of curiosity, I checked the credits at the end and was surprised to see that Dogobomb had apparently handed off the cutscenes to an external studio, which may explain the gap in quality between the actual game and the way these looked. I just found it strange since Tonda Ross, the head of Dogobomb who I mentioned earlier, had such a background in animation and motion graphics, but didn't bother to keep this under his own watch. Secondly, I wish the game had its own built-in journaling feature to keep track of everything. Like, if nothing else, at least a menu that keeps a log of all the notes that you picked up. If I hadn't been using my phone for reference, I would have been left retracing my steps a lot more by drafting the same room several times to look at that scrap of paper with a secret password buried in its paragraphs, or the poster with the numbers hastily scrawled into its margins again, because I forgot what they said. PC players on Steam have the advantage of a new Steam overlay feature that they can tab over to whenever they want and keep notes on a per game basis. But on console, this is a pretty major pain point. And third is just the randomness of certain elements. Like, yeah, the idea of a roguelike is repeating the gameplay loop over and over until you eventually overcome all the obstacles and achieve your goal. But with other games in the genre, say for example Hades, if you're skillful enough with the combat, you can progress even without the help of the best upgrades that the game provides. It feels like you can push a little bit further because you're good at the game, even though you haven't been blessed by the gods of RNG. But in Blueprints, you'll just kind of run into a literal brick wall during a run, and there's nothing you can do to get around or over it. If the game decides that the rooms you're allowed to draft are all dead ends, or don't have exits heading north, you're totally boned. It doesn't matter if you have 40 steps left and a bag full of resources. Better luck next time, chump. You have a tiny bit of agency when it comes to dealing with this situation, but I wish you had more so it felt like you could blame yourself for making a bad choice, rather than feeling like you were cheated by the system. This is super frustrating when it happens. I don't know how they would go about accommodating a change of that magnitude without fundamentally upheaving the entire foundation of the game, so they probably shouldn't, but I just wanted to let it be known that it will happen to you, but you shouldn't let it stop you from enjoying the rest of the ride. Blueprints is an amazing game with a massive amount of content and a brilliant structure that feels fresh and inventive. It manages to merge the intrigue of becoming a true puzzle sleuth with the excitement of discovery inherent to roguelikes, while stringing together a deep narrative that holds its secrets close to its chest. There are a few odd blemishes that crop up, but none that really sour the overall experience. It's a miraculous first showing from the team at Dogobomb, and I can't wait to see what they cook up next. Blueprints receives a 9 out of 10.